Okay, so a quick review of what we have been doing. Um, so I told you for this module, the outcomes are that you should be able to choose a suitable method for solving an implicit nonlinear equation and to develop a computer code to solve implicit nonlinear equations using different methods, and also to describe the convergence rate and stability criteria for the method. So there's one more outcome I keep forgetting to fill in on that. That is for the system of nonlinear equations, which we'll do in the next class. Okay. So what are nonlinear equations? I think we had a very long discussion about it. I told you equations which involve uh, powers of the dependent variable other than one. It could be fractional powers or square, cubic, whatever. Those equations and also equations that contain transcendental functions like exponent, logarithmic, trigonometric functions, and hyperbolic trigonometric functions. Such equations are called nonlinear equations, but but some of these equations, even though they are nonlinear, it is easy to evaluate them by simply substituting all the unknowns. Such equations are called explicit nonlinear equations. But the problem comes when you cannot solve these equations explicitly. Even if you know all the variables in all the known variables, you substitute and you're left with only one unknown. If you cannot directly determine the value of that unknown when knowing all the other known variables, such equations are called implicit nonlinear equations. I think we discussed this earlier. An equation could be implicit in terms of some variables, but when it comes to other variables, it could be an explicit equation. I given you this example. I think also I have written other examples on the slide last time. Velocity, if you want to find out, this is an explicit equation. But for a given velocity, if you want to find CD or mass, then this becomes an implicit equation. So we discussed about graphing and scanning, which are approximate methods. I also shown you in Python how you can perform scanning and graphing for a function. The important thing is to be able to do, this is kind of a trial and error, but it's a more systematic way of doing trial and error. We rewrite the function such that it looks like this. You bring everything to one side and try to prepare a table that's called scanning, or if you prepare a plot f as a function of r, then you can identify at which point for what value of r approximately the function takes a value of 0. That sort of thing you can identify. But a more rigorous method, a more methodical way of solving the equations is, they can be categorized into two groups I mentioned, bracketing methods and non-bracketing methods. In bracketing methods, I think we had discussed, we have to write the equation again as function of the unknown equals to 0, and then you have to find two initial values such that for one value this expression gives negative number, and for other value it gives positive number. This is important because if a function is taking positive value at a point and negative value at another point, you can always be assured that in between those 2 points there has to be at least one point at which the function value has to be 0. Okay, so once you have two initial guesses like that, where at one guess the function is positive value and the other guess positive function has negative value. So then the problem boils down to making that bracket narrower and narrower. Decrease the width of the bracket and always make sure that your root stays in the bracket. So that is the idea of bracketing methods. The question is, how do you make this? How do you decrease the width of the brackets? There are two approaches I mentioned. One is bisection, where you simply every iteration you cut the bracket into halves, to equal halves. That's why it's called bisection. And then see which half has the root. Whichever half has the root, you keep that. The other one you discard it. And false position method uses in exactly same as the other because it's the bisection method also. Only difference is we use a different formula to identify the new root. The point, when I say new root is the point where you will break the bracket. Okay, where you draw the boundary between two parts of the bracket that you're making. Okay, so for bisection, I have explained this that we go here 12 to 16 is the bracket, and then 15 is the center point, and you here see that 12, now there are two brackets. Once you find the 14 as the midpoint of the bracket, 12 to 14 is one bracket, and 14 to 16 is other bracket. But clearly you see that at the new root, okay, the lower limit of the original bracket and the new root, both of them give same sign for the function value. At both the places, the function value is positive. So since the sign of this function value at the root is matching the sign of this limit of the bracket, you just discard this limit and you make this your lower limit. In the next case, 40 to 16 is the bracket. You're concentrating on only this bracket. The center point there is going to be the midpoint. There is going to be 15. Now you notice that the match, at the new root, the function value is negative, and that matches with the function value at the upper limit of the present bracket. So you just replace the upper limit with this one because the sign is matching with that one. Here the sign matched with the lower limit, so you remove the lower limit. Now that way you continue until you get required accuracy. False position method is also exactly mostly same. Only difference is instead of bisecting the bracket, see root is xl plus xu by 2. Instead of that, we use this formula. And what is the meaning of that formula? The meaning of that formula is we are trying to approximate the function between these 2 points as a straight line, and we are trying to find out what is the point at which that straight line, the approximate straight line. So this is the actual function, and this is the actual point you're looking for. But if in between these two, if we assume that the function, we approximate that function as a straight line, you'll be a little closer to the root, right? And especially when you get closer and closer. And that is why, even though it is a little bit more complicated in formula than the bisection method, it is worth to do this extra little complicated formula because you will get faster convergence. What do I mean by faster convergence? I told you convergence means if you go, if you make more and more iterations, if the equation, if the solution is becoming more and more accurate, then then the question is how many iterations it takes. No, bisection method. If it takes 20 iteration to arrive at a solution with the required accuracy, false position may take far less than that. That is what I meant by having a faster convergence, meaning converging to a required accuracy in a fewer number of iterations. Okay. So that's I think what we have been discussing, and we also done a small bit of programming on that. So here we can set the stopping criteria, and I told you the stopping criteria is based on the approximate error, approximate relative error, which is how do we calculate the approximate error? I think I told you the approximate error because in any real situation we'll not know the true solution. If we know the true solution, why would we pull our hair out trying to get a solution? We already know it. We don't know it. When we don't know the true solution, we also don't know the true error in the solution that you have, because you have to always be humble and say that the solution I'm providing is an approximate solution. Then the question is going to be how much error you are making. We don't know the true solution, so we don't know the true error. So the next best thing we could do is get an approximate error. What is the meaning of approximate error? Now, yours is an approximate value, but if there is a way for you to find a better approximation than what you have, then you can compare that better approximation with your approximation to find an approximate error, and then you can divide that with the better approximation to you get so that you get what is known as relative approximate error. Okay. uh, so in the when we do iterations, whenever you have an approximate value, okay, whatever solution you get at a stage in your computations, you have done 10 iterations, let's say. So you have the 10th iteration value for the solution. That is your approximate value. Is someone trying to ask a question? Okay. Now, let's say you started a solution and you did 10 iterations. At the 10th iteration, you have a solution. Now, if you want to have a better approximation for that, one way to do it is just do another iteration. So the 11th iteration value should be a better approximate for the solution than the 10th iteration value. So if you want to find the error in the 10th iteration value, you can compare these two numbers and see what is the error in them. That is exactly what we do here. See, at any iteration, you compare the new iteration value with the old one, you will get the approximate error. Then you're normalizing that with the new one, so you'll get relative approximate error. Okay, and usually we put a tolerance. We say the typical numbers are, we say 10 to the negative 3, 10 to the negative 4, 10 to the negative 5. You stop the iteration when this relative approximate error becomes less than this tolerance, and which is typically taken as 10 to the negative 3, 10 to the negative 4, of that sort. Okay, so I think so this was the little program that we've been working on, where I told you about how to do the scanning for a route. Okay, this is where we did scanning. For small values, we incremented and we saw the function value changes. I told you wherever the function value changes sign, it's all negative. Interesting. Okay, or you can do plotting. You see, for a range of CDs, I have plotted the function. And when first of all, I had to change the function such that it looks like f of r equals 0. That's why I bought, see, the square root of mg over cd times tan hyperbolic of square root of gcd over m times t minus v. Because I brought the v to the other side also, so that this whole thing becomes 0. The solution, the equation for which I'm trying to find a solution now is that this expression equals to 0 is what I'm looking for. So what I did is I plotted that expression for a range of values of CD, and then when I plot them, I can approximately locate, okay, about this point, which is 0.42, or 4, between 4.2 and 4.3, you can approximately say the function value becomes 0, or the solution is somewhere there. So that is plotting. And I think in the first go around, I have shown you how to solve a quadratic equation, but then I was thinking a quadratic equation is too simple an equation. So then we decided to do with this one, a cubic equation. X cubed minus 21x squared plus 131 times x equals to 231. Okay, if when you're doing a problem, when you're solving an engineering problem, if you arrive at an equation like this, and now you're required to find for what value of x this equation is satisfied. See, you cannot solve this equation right now. You need a special method. How do you solve a cubic polynomial? So here I have done the plotting of that one. See, I take an x value range of 1 to 15, and with spacing of 0.01. So this creates, okay, let me load the libraries. Okay, we load that library. At the beginning we have this library, I load that one also. Okay, so as an example, as an exercise, hands-on exercise on topics that we have learned on the bracketing method, I'll try and solve this cubic equation. Okay, so the technique itself can be used for all kinds of equation. The bungee jumper problem, it's a nonlinear equation because of it has a square roots and also it has hyperbolic tangent. You could do that. You could have done with those problems also. But here, I wanted a simple equation for which I know the true value of the solution, because the true value will help you in understanding the method. See, this cubic polynomial, I just made it up. How I made it up is I multiplied x minus 3 times x minus 7 times x minus 11. So if you do that polynomial multiplication, this is the equation you get. So now since I have made up this equation, I know that the solutions are. Is someone trying to ask a question? Hello? Let me see who this is. Uwais Ali Khan. There is a new name, Uwais Ali Khan. I think. Are you joining us new today?
Yes, sir.
So this is first. Yeah, this is your first time in the class, Uwais.
Yes, sir. First class.
Okay, okay. So I have collected all the videos. Unfortunately, I could not collect every single video because some of them got expired. I think they changed the policy of saving the videos. But most of the videos of the earlier lecturers are available. I'll find a way to make them available to you. Otherwise, you please
Okay.
go through them.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And unless you have a question, please mute your mic so that we can carry on with the class. Thank you. Okay. So we'll try to have a numerical method to solve this equation. First thing I have done is, if you remember, np.arange. np, I have imported the library numpy as np. In that library, there's a function called arange, which takes the initial value, final value, and the spacing between the individual elements in the array, and it will create that array. For example, this one creates 1, 1.01, 1.02, 1.03, likewise, all the way till 14.98, 14.99, and 15. Okay, that's what that does. Now I'm saying plt.plot. Again, plt is another alias that I have created for the matplotlib.pyplot library, and that has some good functions for us to do the plotting. See, matplotlib.pyplot, we have imported that as plt. I think someone has his mic on. Uwais,
Sir, offing, sir.
you're okay. 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 So PLT is an alias for this library, matplotlib.pyplot, which that library has a function called plot, which plots, if I give it two arrays, it plots one array on the x-axis, one array on the y-axis, and it generates the line graph. So that's what we try to do here. Where is that? Here. See, I'm calling the plot function. I'm passing two arrays to it. First array is this x that I created, where CD is changing from 1 to 15. See, CD. And the second array I'm passing is whatever this function returns. See, this is the function we described. Okay, that is a function. Now, if I pass this array to that function, what that returns is, for each of the values in that x array, which I'm sending this, it will find the corresponding value of this expression. So we asked it to plot this versus this, and it plotted, and this is what it is. Okay. Okay, that's the plotting part. You could do a similar thing with the scanning also, but here's the algorithm for dissection method. We have done this in the last class, so I'll go a little quickly here, but I'll add some more, some additional things to it. So initially, um, see, I'm saying that my tolerance in the root I'm looking for is 10 to the negative 8. Okay, and then we are doing, I have, see, for bracketing method, if you remember the algorithm, that what you should start with is two initial guesses, 11 and 10, and we have to choose these initial guesses such that the function value has opposite signs at these points. At 10, see the function value is negative. At the 20, we don't say it, but we can definitely find out that the function value will be positive. So it's negative here, it's positive there. This is a good initial bracket for us to start with. Okay. But to be in the safe side, it's always better to check that. No, I have made sure that I'm giving the initial bracket appropriately as per the requirement. But it's a good program to just make sure that it is the case also. So you have, see, this is the function um, which will return the value of the expression that we are trying to see. If you see, no, I have rewritten the equation because this way we cannot solve it properly. No, to be able to do the bisection method, you have to bring everything, or any bracketing method, you have to bring everything to one side. So this is the original equation. X cube plus x cube minus 20 times 21 times x square plus 131 times x equals to 31 is the original equation. But if you want to solve it using uh, bisection method, everything has to be brought to one side. So x cubed minus 21 x square plus 131 times x minus 231 equals 0. So this 231 we got it to the other side, and that is the expression here. Okay, so I wrote a different function for that, a separate standalone function for that, because this is my main bisection method. It could stay the same. Later on, instead of this equation, if I want to solve a different equation, then all I have to do is change this function. Okay. So now, I'm calculating what is the function value for the lower limit of my initial bracket and what is the function value for the upper limit of my initial bracket. Those values I'm storing in variables called FL and FU. Okay, that is that. Now, how do you ensure that the function value has opposite signs at these 2 points? I think in the last class I told you the way to find out whether two numbers have the same sign or different signs is to simply multiply them. If the product is positive, then that means these two numbers which you have multiplied, either both of them are negative or both of them are positive. Only in that circumstance, you'll get the product to be positive. But if for these two values, if the product comes to be positive, that means both of them are positive or both of them are negative. In which case, we cannot use that bracket for the bracketing method, either bisection or false position. So if that is true, we're asking the computer to stop there, and we're just giving a message to the whoever is given this bracket saying that the bracket may not contain a root, and we'll stop it there. Okay. Alternatively, if it is okay, if the product comes out to be negative, that means definitely one of them is positive and one of them is negative, in which case we can continue further. So then for the first time, for the first iteration, for the zeroth iteration, for the zeroth iteration, let us say XL is your approximation for the root. Okay. And initially there is error is 100% because you don't know anything. So we said relative error is 1. It's okay, some number. And then we have a counter to count how many iterations we have done. And I'm starting the counter at 1. Okay. So this is the bisection method. Every time you check error. So initially I said under the error is 100% or relative error is 1. So this will error is more than tolerance. So we have to get into the iterations, into the loop. In the loop, the first thing we do is we are finding out uh, the new root, which is the center point. Okay, because I'm plotting it there, I'm going to bring it here. Okay, so each time in the loop, what you're doing, the first thing you're doing is you're finding the new root, which is the center point of the initial bracket or whatever the bracket at that time is. Now you find the error because you have an old value, so you can find how much the error is in the new root. And then once you have that, you are printing. For this iteration, what is the number of iteration and what is the lower limit of the bracket, what is the upper limit of the bracket, what is the new root, and what is the error, the relative approximate error in the new root. Okay, so this we do, and then based on the new root, now there are two brackets. Now because this is what we have, right? There is lower limit for the root, there is upper limit for the root, and the new root we are finding it at the middle XR. So now there are two brackets with either XL XR will have the root or XR XU will have the root. How do you find out? You have to compare the signs. Once again, you compare the signs of function values between these two, FL and FR. Okay, you found the function value at the root, and you already know the function value at XL because you stored it. Uh, you compare the signs at those 2 points. Again, same logic. You compare the product. If the product is positive, that means either both of them are positive or both of them are negative. If these two have the same the function value at XL and XR, if those two have the same sign, that means the root is not here. So we have to replace XL with XR. We have to make this one as our XL, if that is the case. Okay. So if both of them have same sign, then we will make the XR as XL and XU stays. Or alternatively, okay, if this is not true, meaning if FL and FR have different signs, that means the root is here, which means the root is not there anymore because you know if these two have different signs, that automatically means that these two have the same sign. So we'll have to discard that. In that case, for the next thing, the XL will stay the same and XU will be changed to XR. See, this is the original bracket, and after we do this checking, we see you know which uh, with which of the limits the function value at the XR matches with. If function value at XR matches with XL, then we'll make XL as the new XR. We replace XL with XR. Or if the function value at XR, the sign of the function value at XR is same as the sign of the function value at XU. In that case, we have to replace XU with XR. Okay, so that is the logic here. Okay, since we don't have to evaluate the function again. We simply, because we stored it, we are just storing it in the FL and FU. That's it. That is as simple as that. Only thing we are doing at the end of the iteration here. See, after every iteration, for the sake of comparison, we are comparing the old value root with the new value. So you have to save the old value. See, at the starting of the iteration, we are calculating the new value of the XR. So before that happens, you want to save whatever the value in the iteration is. At the end of the iteration, we are storing it in old root XR0. Okay. So now when you go here, you overwrite the XR, but for the sake of comparison, you store the old one. So this is the end of the previous iteration. After this one, also counter also I'm changing. For the next iteration, the counter will be 2 because at the end of the loop, I am increasing counter by 1. So when it comes here, now see in the first iteration x0, I'll delete this. This is not needed. In the first iteration, x0 was one of the initial estimates XL, but now x0 XR old will have the XR from the first iteration, and then you calculate the XR for the second iteration. Then you compare between first and second iteration the roots. At the end of the second iteration, XOR 0 will hold the value of root found in the second iteration. And then immediately in the third iteration, you find a new root, and then you compare, for the calculation of error, you compare the difference between the root calculated in the second error, in the second iteration and third iteration. That way it goes on. So this is what we have discussed in the last class, and this is what we have. Okay. So in 27 iterations, you wanted a tolerance of 10 to the negative 8, and it took 27 iterations. Because you use this bracket, it is calculating the root between those two, which is 11. Instead of this, if you try this, let's see what happens. I'll delete the thing there. See, between 2 and 8, there are two roots, 3 and 7. Let's see what happens. So I said 2 and 8. Any, okay, you look at it carefully. Can someone predict what happens if I give 2 and 8 as the initial bracket? Anyone? Anyone? I'll zoom in it for you. Okay. So, if I give, see, between 2 and 8, there are two roots. One is 3 and one is 7. If I give 2 and 8 as initial bracket, what happens? Anyone? Okay, let me see if I can call upon someone to give an answer to that. Hmm. Okay, we'll ask KM Sandeep. KM Sandeep, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. So, Sandeep, what happens? What happens if I give 2 and 8 as a initial bracket? Which root will it find?
Between 2 and 8, it will take
Yeah, but there are two roots, 3 and 7.
3, 3 and 7. It is also 3 and 7 between 3 and 7.
No, 3 is a root, Sandeep, and 7 is a root. Okay, Sandeep, I think you're not. It's okay. Anyone else who wants to volunteer and give a good answer to that? Anyone? Okay. So what I was expecting you would say is, between 3 and 7, it is not even a valid initial bracket, because at 2, the function value is negative. At 7, again, the function value is negative. See, this is the problem with bracketing methods. Um, because the function value is negative here and negative there, this will not even accept that as a valid bracket. You'll see. I run this and we put a logic there which will tell us that, okay, okay, see, with 2 and 7 I'm running this, 2 and 8. Why did it even run then? Okay, in the notebook I'm having difficulty doing the exit. um, Let me see. Okay. You know what I should do? I think I should put an else statement here. Else. Only if that is false, then it will do all this. That exit thing works if you are doing in a regular program, but actual. Okay. So now it will work. See what happens here is hmm, because it crashed and reloaded. Okay. See, when we try to run this, it will say the bracket may not contain the root with 2 and 8. The reason is even though there are two roots, but no, generally speaking, when we have even number of roots in a bracket, then they will both have same sign in that bracket. The ends of the if there are even number of roots. If there are odd number of roots, like one root, then the bracket will have opposite signs. Two roots, the bracket will have same sign. Three roots, again, for example, the bracket 2 to 14 has three roots. In that case, the method will work, but it will, we cannot predict which root it will get. In this case, it got 11, but if you keep trying, it may get different roots. Now, so the point I try to make is we have to be a little careful when we are doing the bracketing methods because sometimes if there are even number of roots, then we cannot use that bracket. If you're doing scanning, let's say, okay, and when you do scanning, if you're scanning like this, let's say initially you used 4, okay, and then 6, and then 12, and then 14, then you will make you might think that this function is always positive and has no roots, which is possible. Some functions may not have a root actually, may not have a solution, or if you're doing scanning, let's say starting at uh, 0, and in steps of if you overstep from if you say 2 and then your next level is 8, then you might think that there are no roots between 2 and 8, which is not true. Your step was too long. If you had taken more finer steps in the scanning, if you had gone from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8, then you would have known that there are actually two roots in between. Well, this is one example. There is also possible that there are multiple roots in a bracket. But if there are even number of roots in a bracket, then for the beginning of the bracket and the end of the bracket, the sign may be same. So that is why I was very careful when I gave the message. Um, okay, if I say 2 to 8, you see the message I have coded in. It reads thus: the bracket may not contain a root. No, we cannot authoritatively say just because the function value has same sign at the beginning and end of the bracket does not necessarily mean that there is no root. It only means that we cannot guarantee that there is a root. It could be that there is no root, or it could be also that there are an even number of roots. Okay. But if it has opposite signs, then we can definitely say yes, there is a root, or it's a possibility that there is more than one root also, but an odd number of roots. Only if there are odd number of roots, then we get opposite signs at the ends. Okay, so that is something I wanted you to notice. And then 2 to 4, if I say, we'll comfortably get this one. And that root is 3. And if I say 4 to 7 or 4 to 10 even, okay, we'll get the 7 root. That is a 7 root. Okay. So now what I do now is now we'll do I want to show you in this case, you may not be very comfortable using the approximate error. You may think, how do we know that we can use approximate error to estimate the real error? So for that, for this problem, we know the true value. What is the value? Okay, 4, 7. So that is 7. So the true value of the solution here is 7. I told you before, in reality, we'll not know the true value. This is for demonstration. This is for academic interest. I have chosen a problem which has a true value and we know the true value, 7. Okay. And in this process, we're trying to calculate that 7. Uh, I'll start two arrays. I'll store the for each iteration. I'll start to you know bisection method. I'll say EA, approximate error. And this means I'm this Python. I have an empty list there, list, and I'll say bisection method, um, true error. Let that be equal. That is also I'm starting a new list. Okay, so here this is approximate error and the true error. How do you calculate the true error? Same expression. Okay, same expression, but you know we use the true value. True value minus XR divided by true value. That is the error in the current solution. This is the true error, and that is the approximate error. So what I'll do here is at the end of each iteration, we'll say bisection method true error dot append. You know this list, right? True error and bisection method approximate error. Approximate. Okay, what did I use here? I think to be consistent, EA is approximate error, ET is true error. Let's stick to that notation. Okay, so I'll say ET. So that is a notation we'll use. ET is append ET dot append EA. Okay, so what this does is we are creating arrays. So in the end, I'll tell you why I did that. We'll run this. Okay, so that is this is a table. So what I can do now is I can plot the both. Okay, plt dot plot. See, if I can use the plot only with one argument also, and here I say bisection method e a and plt dot plot bisection method underscore et. So what this plot does is it will simply plot, and I'm only giving one argument. When I give only one argument, the plot still works, and what gets plotted in the x-axis, is the index number. Okay, so zeroth iteration, first iteration, second, fifth iteration, that automatically comes out to be the index number. See, uh, this is list, right? Um, if I plot this for you, see, this is the errors, and this is BA of 0. Okay, why would it come out to be 0? I think no. Give me a second. True error. Four and 6. Okay, so I wanted to show you that we can plot with only generally what we are doing is some x comma y. Then it takes the values in the x and it takes the values in the y, two, and then plots them. If you only give one, it plots against the index number in the array. So I was telling you that here, where was I? Yeah, see index number. Each of them has an index. Okay. See, for example, if I say 1 to 10, it gives me those index, at those locations, location 1, 2. And in Python, the locations start from 0. So that's why it is 0, and we get that. And to be able to see this clearly, what I'll do is plt dot x, no, y scale. Y scale will take it as logarithmic scale, log scale. Now, if you plot it, no, this I'm still a little surprised with this. Did I make a mistake with the other calculation somewhere? Which one is this? Okay, that's another thing. We don't know which one is which, right? So I'll add this label equals, and this is true error, no, approximate error, and here I'll say label equals, this is true error. Again, I cannot stress this enough. In reality, you may not be able to know the true error. No, this is only for this case that you can some limited cases like this for academic interest. I can find out the so the labels are not showing. To show the labels, I have to say plt dot legend. Okay, start. So now it's clear. The blue one is the approximate error, and this is the true error. And it still bothers me that the true error is 0 at the first time. Sai Okay, let us assume that he didn't have any question, that that was it was accidentally. We'll give a benefit of doubt. We'll say that was an accident. He didn't intend to do that. true value is fine. So XR. Okay. So, see, this is how you may have to debug things sometimes. I forgot to change this. They're the same numbers. This is ET. I wanted to print ET also and see why it is 0 in the first iteration. Why would it be 0? Why is XR 7? Okay. Well, okay. Okay, that's a little problematic thing there. 3.5. Now I know. Okay. See, we'll do a couple of things here. See, this is the plot. We'll not have that 0 problem anymore. Okay. So here's the plot. So you see that uh, the approximate error, which you may not see that it's an important thing because we're simply comparing with the next iteration. But what this plot tells you is it very well approximates the true error. And the good news is the approximate error is always more than the true error. This is not always the case, but for the bisection method, this is the case. The approximate error which you calculate by this. See, in this particular case, since you knew the true value, you can find the true error, and you're comparing. Okay, I'm using approximate error in place of true error. How do they compare? And what you can see here, at least for this bisection method, the approximate error overestimates the true error, which is actually good news for you because uh, if I am reporting the answer, if I tell my manager saying that the error is 10%, and I'm using approximate error, but in my mind, I know that this is really the worst case scenario. The true error will actually be less than that. So the manager will not mind it, right? If I say 10% error, and later on he finds that the error is only 5 or 6%, there's no room for complaint there. But if the error was underestimating the error, that's the problem. If I say the error is 10%, and if it turns out to be 15 or 20%, that is the problem. But overestimation is okay. And this approximate error, at least for this case, and this plot shows that it overestimates the error, which is good. So here I said, I'm running these iterations till I get an error of, excuse me. I'm running these iterations till I get error less than 10 power minus 8. And when I said error, I'm running it until my approximate error is less than 10 power minus 8. So I can have peace in my mind saying that the actual true value of error will be much less than that. It can nowhere be more than that. So that is what I wanted you to see from this plot. And this was only possible in this case that I can show this because I chose an easy to solve cubic equation for which I knew the exact value. Since we knew the exact value, I could do this kind of comparison. Okay, is that clear so far? Okay, so I'll do one more thing very quickly. See, I'll copy all of this and I'll what I do now is, instead of this formula, this is bisection formula. See the same set of instructions, and this is the bisection formula. Okay, now I'll switch it with. I think in the last class also I did it, if I remember right. I'll switch this with this formula. This is false position formula. Everything else is same. Okay, everything else is same. Only thing I'll change is I'll comment that out, and we'll replace that formula with this false position formula. Okay, so what do you think changes here? I mentioned in the class that false position method converges faster. Not as a rule, but in most cases, it in fact converges faster. So we'll see if that is true. Okay, so all I changed is here, and false position method, I'll change these so that I can plot them along with the other ones. Okay, so see, false position only took 6 iterations. The bisection method took 27 iterations to come to that value of 7. False position, in 6 iterations, it was able to arrive at the solution for the required accuracy. You want to see how that happened, then I'll add these two. I'm adding 2 more lines to the plot. False position, and now I think I have to change this also. Approximate error, bisection method, and a true error in bisection method. Okay, this is approximate error in false position. Okay. And this here is approximate error in false position. Now you can compare how the performance of these two methods is. You see, uh, we're starting with the same initial value and everything. Bisection method took 26 iterations to come to the required accuracy of 10 to the negative 8. Whereas the false position method, see, within 6 iterations, it was able to achieve see, look at how rapidly the error is decreasing in the false position method as compared to the other one, bisection method. Generally, this is the case, but be mindful, not necessarily always. Okay, I noticed that for this problem, I noticed that when we are trying to find the third solution, which is this one. Okay, let us start at 10 and 20. Okay, so you're trying to find the 11th, the root 11, and bisection took 27 iterations. Let us see what false position method does for the different root, to find the different root. See, in this case, false position has taken 94 iterations to calculate. Now let us look at it in the plot. The true error, I think I have to change it because the true value is showing mistake. Because true value I have to change because this is a new root now. Okay, let me change the other one also. True value is here is 11. We'll run that, and I'll run this one as well. Okay, is Kulmani here? Okay. Kulmani, I'm done. Is Kulmani or someone? Okay. See, now you see, in this case, bisection is much faster. It only took 27 iteration, whereas false position method, it has taken to get the same level of accuracy. It has taken much more iterations. Okay, so the message I'm trying to get across is, uh, in general, we cannot claim that false position method is much faster than the bisection method, but in most cases, false position method is indeed faster than. When I say faster, we talk in terms of number of iterations it takes to arrive at the solution. That's called rate of convergence. Okay, I think I have already gone over a little. Who is the next teacher for you? Okay, I think that, yeah, Dr. Kulman is already here. So, Sairam, can you send me the attendance again like you did last time?
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Sairam. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Kulmani, sir, you can take over, sir.
Thank you, sir. And today I will take the class using mobile actually. I don't electricity in my village today. Some electric cut is there. So explaining maybe not proper way as compared to previous case. Wait for 1 minute. One minute, 1 minute. So today we'll start the fluctuating load. Deformation means failure due to fluctuating load. Up to today, last class, we had done for the theoretical stress concentration factor. Can you say me how much completed? Any one of you? Hello? Can you say how much completed last class? Hello? Is my screen visible to you?
Sorry, sir.
Hello? Okay. So here I should sorry. Each fluctuating started part 2. Unit number 2 part 2 started no for your section. Stress concentration factor. Is this is started for your section?
Yes, sir, completed, sir.
Okay, means started means okay, we'll check how much completed. Is this figure completed?
Completed, sir.
It is not I not noted down. No. Oh, one numerical is solved. No, one numerical problem is
Yes,
solved.
sir.
So today
No,
we'll solve
sir.
second
I not solved, sir.
numerical not solved. Okay, thank you. So we'll start today. No problem. But during numerical solution, no, Tata book and book are required, and I don't have book in this one, so little difficult to that one. Okay, but I will try my best to clear that one. question is given us a flat plate subjected to tensile force of 5 Newton is shown in figure like this. Here you can see 5 Newton working load and diameter is given as different places. Diameter thickness, okay, we'll check. Okay, this is plate, so this is width 45 and 32 width is given us, and diameter of hole is given us 15. Radius of this fillet is given us 5 r given us, okay, the radius of the, and we need to find out thickness in this question. So here question remaining thing given us, the plate is grey cast iron FG200 means, what is meaning of FG200? Anyone of you can give the answer. What is meaning of FG200? Because question is given up to here only. So solving the problem, we must know what is FG200. If you remember in material selection, we
Yes, sir.
explained different type material.
Hello.
FG, different type. Yes.
FG means, sir, grey cast iron. That 200 is tensile strength, sir.
Very good, very good. So this type question may become. So we should know that one. Okay, very good. Ultimate strength is 200. Ultimate tensile strength and grey cast iron metal is here. So on that situation, factor of safety gives 2.5. From ultimate strength, we will divide factor of safety to find out the maximum stress value. So let's solve the problem. First of all, we should write given data. Whenever we will write given data, write proper way. Means fully. Factor of safety means factor of safety. You should write. We should not write only FG. Just here you can see load P equal to 5 Newton. Ultimate strength S ultimate equal to 200 Newton per mm square. Factor of safety equal to 2.5, like that you should write. But in book it simply given us P equal to 5 Newton, S ultimate equal to 200, and Fs equal to 2.5. Don't write like that. If you write on that way, you will lose your marks. Is anyone is recording the meeting? I should start the recording also.